Selwyn here from WynnStrength.com, bringing you the third day of the fifth week of the Darkhorse Training Program by Brian Alsruhe. Like usual, I'll be leaving a link below for Brian Alsruhe's video explaining the program and outlining just exactly what the program is, what it entails, and the structure of it, as well as links to the Lift Vault website where they've actually taken away all of the hard work and created a spreadsheet for you so that you can do the program at your own pace without having to worry about messing around with Excel or Google Sheets. So check those out, really good resources. Today is third day, so that is lower body day. We're doing lunges, deadlifts, and some abs and some squats. So a lot of movements today. We're starting off with conditioning, which is just simply some kettlebell swings and some jumps. Again, usual standard conditioning stuff, nothing crazy, just wanting to get the blood flowing and try and work in some patterns that might be useful for today. So obviously kettlebell swings are great for that, and the jumps are going to be good for the squats as well. So moving on to the max effort work for today, because this is a second week, we're following on with the similar movements for this phase of the program, that being lunges, pause deadlifts, planks, and just 30 seconds of rowing on the rowing machine. Starting off with the lunges, you'll notice last week I did lunges in the static form with dumbbells. This week we switched that up, moved over to lunges with the barbell in the front rack position and reverse style lunges. So instead of stepping forward with the lunge, we're actually stepping backwards onto our back foot for the lunge. I quite like this variant of the lunge just because of it feels like, I have no idea if there's any proof behind this, but it does feel like there's less stress on the knee joint, especially since we're not moving forward and having to stop all that weight on that front leg. We're kind of just shifting our weight backward, trying to stay obviously as upright as possible. That way it kind of takes the stress off of any forward momentum on that kneecap. Again, I have no idea if it does anything, but for me personally, it just feels better on the legs and the knees. It's also a little bit nicer on the stance length as well. With that, I prefer to do this with the weight on the front, in the front rack position rather than on the back like a typical back squat. A couple of reasons for that. First off being that it does help me practice the front rack position for things like the front squat and cleaning as well. It's kind of, because the weight isn't going to be as heavy with a lunge as it is with a front squat, it accustoms my wrists and my arms in order to get it into that, for me personally, the awkward front rack position, where if I do front squats, I usually use the wrist straps and wrap those around the bar. I've talked about that in a previous video. That way I can squat heavier weights than usual, but the barbell with its awkward weight won't cause any discomfort on my wrist joint, which I really find happens when the weight gets heavy, just because the weight does start to shift forward a little bit, and I'm trying to keep the elbows up as high as possible. My flexibility in the shoulders and the wrist just isn't there, and I'm not accustomed to the front rack position in general. The other reason I like to do the front rack position is it just shifts the center of gravity for the movement. Because we are putting the barbell in the front rack position, it does force us to keep a more of an upright torso positioning, which I think is a bit more important with the lunge than it is with the squat or something along those lines, when the weight is on your back, obviously you're going to be leaning forward to a degree to offset the center of gravity in your back. When we do put that in the front rack position, we're able to stay in definitely a more upright torso position, what I think is more beneficial to the lunge, keeps everything more balanced. I think it's just in general a nicer way to do the lunge, just because everything's more upright, you're not leaning forward, and you're able to get a nicer stretch in that rear leg on that hip joint there. Again, no proof. I just like these ways of setting it up for my personal preferences and tastes. Try it yourself, see if it does feel better, and I mean, if it does help you lunge more, then that's a good thing. Again, I'm focusing on trying to attack my weaknesses, and unilateral leg movements is something I've ignored for quite a long time, so I'm kind of wanting to introduce that back into the program, get some more training stimulus regarding that, and just movements that I prefer are going to help me push that along, just so I get more training stimulus, more exposure to doing some single leg movements there. Next off, we coupled that with pause deadlifts. These were for 1 rep maxes. So for the Warm-ups for the deadlifts, for the pause deadlifts, I'll generally do regular deadlifts, obviously with the barbell, with the empty barbell. So we're just doing 45 pounds and probably couple of sets of 10, and then when we start adding weight, we'll start doing 5s, and then once we hit a weight where I'm going to do 3s, that's where I'll start adding that pause, just so I don't need to warm up a pause with an empty barbell. I don't think that's very useful or necessary. So once the weight gets relatively heavy, that's when I like to start adding in the pause. So today we just added in the pause once we hit 225. Again, relatively not that heavy, but in the progression of how I like to warm up, that's kind of where I start to introduce that pause. Today's pause, I aimed for an inch off of the ground, so not quite at the knees, not quite just below the knees where it was last week. Again, just to introduce some more variety with the movement. Nothing fancy, no reasoning behind it other than it is a spot where I like to do a pause. My pause range for the deadlift is anywhere from the knee and below. I don't think there is any benefit in doing an above the knee paused deadlift, just because at that point you might as well do a rack pull, because you pretty much overcome the hardest point of that lift and you're just pausing at the top where most people are generally stronger. Once you can get that, generally, unless your grip gives out, if you can deadlift that weight up and past your knees, you're gonna lock out that lift, just because the way you can cheat almost. You can shift hips forward and make things lift up. You can take advantage of certain mechanical leverages and whatnot. So that's why I don't think there's that much benefit in above the knee pauses. Definitely huge benefits, I think, with the below the knee, anywhere below the knee, wherever you think you have a weak point or a slowing down or a stopping point, where you notice in general, like, just about mid shins, it's really difficult for me. That's where I have my weak points. I like to do a inch off the ground and then an inch below the knee joint. I think that's two good places to stop. The inch off the ground is quite hard because it's almost you just starting your lift and then you're having to stop and then pull up. If you want to make it really difficult, add a double stop. So stop twice below the knee. That really takes out any momentum and just adds that time under tension. One thing I would note, I probably want to rename these maybe studded deadlifts, because they're not really a true pause when I watch back at them. In the past, I've done 2 counts. I've even put a stopwatch out on the floor, so that on my iPhone out on the floor right in front of me, so I can see a timer when it stops, so I can actually get a true 2 counts. Just because it is an honest way to do the pause deadlift. You are going to do a true pause deadlift. By not pausing enough, you're kind of negating the effects of the pause, and you're just kind of slowing down a little bit, then restarting. Really, the pause is to help you drive through any sticking points, as well as increase that time under tension at a sticking point, which should, in theory, train your body to work past that sticking point, because we're adding extra stress at the point where your body finds it weakest. So how do we get over a weak area? We need to do it more. So we need to do this more by adding that pause where we normally stop and drop it. So hopefully we stop and lift it up. The body trains, gets used to the fact that we're stopping at this point and continuing the lift. So hopefully that translates through to heavier weights. Today we did get up to, across the 6 sets, we did 365 all the way up to, we did our last 3 sets at a top set at 425. I wasn't feeling increasing the weight any more than that. The form felt like it was breaking down, and the pauses obviously weren't as long as they should be, so I thought, let's call it at 425 and just rep that out there for some heavy singles. After that, we did some planks. Over the course of the 6 sets, we went from 30 seconds up to 60 seconds just to get that increased training difficulty, and we followed up with some rowing just for 30 seconds, nothing crazy. For our volume set, again, same movements for the lunges, 135 pounds, just 5 reps each leg, just like the max effort work. This wasn't a really taxing weight. Again, just wanted to get back to the groove of single leg work, and just make sure everything's kind of moving in motion and getting ready for that movement there. We followed up with pause deadlifts for sets of 7 at 340 pounds. Today, because we were running short on time like usual, whatever it is, I'm not doing this program that great. That's one of my downfalls with executing this program, is the rest periods kind of draw out a little bit. The setup in between each form each segment kind of elongates, because as I try to catch my breath. So we only did 1 set of volume rather than the 3 sets that are prescribed. Mainly I do this so that I can complete the dynamic effort work, which I think is more important to complete. If I was going to stop somewhere, I would prefer to stop the extra volume sets or even the extra max effort sets, as long as I'm able to introduce all three segments of the workout. So I really want to attack the max effort, the volume, and the dynamic effort movements as long as time permits. Ideally, you complete the full program as written, but if time doesn't permit, cut out a couple of extra sets from the movement so that you can at least get the 3 different training stimuli that your body is really wanting to see in this program. So we did squats. It was 225 with the bands, 10 minute EMOM every minute on the minute, 3 reps. Today's EMOM stretched out to 11 minutes and 11 seconds, so slightly over what I was wanting. Again, the squats are the lower body dynamic effort movements for me personally are very gassing, quite taxing. I'm hoping my conditioning keeps up with this. The 225 is roughly 50% of my 1 rep max, so we're kind of right on that money there with the weights being used. So we really just need to keep that conditioning up and keep taxing and keep testing that conditioning out there. Again, one thing to keep in mind with the dynamic effort is to make sure that your speed and your form are both there. Once you start slowing down or breaking down form, that's a time to stop adding weight or reduce the weight even. Obviously, dynamic means you should be moving with some speed and some explosiveness. If you start slowing down with the movements and the weight choices, then you're kind of doing more volume effort work than you're doing dynamic effort work, because volume is just heavy reps that are performed for however many reps you need to do. So if we're doing that with dynamic effort, now we've done less weight for less reps with no speed, so we haven't really achieved anything there. We've just done less stimulus than we should have if we just did a true volume effort work. And that's kind of, we need to delineate between these 3 segments of the workout so that we are getting the different training stimulus that each segment is wanting to put on the body. We're not doing the same thing over and over again. That's kind of, if you don't do that with the program, you're kind of missing out on the point of the program. So I've been keeping my eye on the weights for that dynamic effort movement. A lot of the weight decreases from phase 1 to phase 2 for that dynamic, just because I did want to make sure that my speed stayed there and that my technique was as above 90% as possible. Ideally 100, but things start to break down as fatigue sets in. That wraps it up for the 3rd day of the 5th week. I think all is going well. I think my body is adapting to the extra conditioning requirements and stresses that are being put on it. I am cutting out huge segments of the workout, so that might be part of it. But I don't feel as fatigued towards the end of like an hour after the workout as I normally did in the first week. So I think we're progressing there. I think the weights are traveling really well. It'll be interesting to see how this turns out at the end of it. So with that being said, I'll leave a playlist right here, like usual, where you can watch the other episodes of the Darkhorse training vlog, stay up to date with the progress, and keep up to date with future progress. So you'll also be able to see my overall rating and review and thoughts of the program. This has been Selwyn from WynnStrength, and remember, a better life through strength.